Okay, today we're going to do Azure Data Factory. If you don't have one created already, go to the Marketplace or click the new plus button here. And we're going to search the Marketplace and type in Azure Data Factory. Press enter, and I misspelt it. Is it going to find it? Drum roll, please. Yeah, it did. So there it is, Data Factory. Click that, and then click the Create button. I've already got one created, so let's get back to the portal here. I've pinned it to the dashboard, Azure Data Factory, click that. And we're going to click the Copy Data Preview Wizard. So this will allow us to create a pipeline without any code. Once that's been created, if you want to look at the job and restart it, etc., click Monitor and Manage. And then Diagram is very useful for seeing the actual data sets that have been created, kind of looking at the different time slices. So let's click Copy Data. And this is a wizard. It's going to walk us through step by step. It's going to open up the Copy Data wizard. So give it a name that's going to make sense to you. This is the overall pipeline. You can have multiple tables in a pipeline. So you don't have to name this to be table specific. Let's just call this one Azure SQL DB to On-Prem SQL. And I'm just going to call it 001 in case I have another one out there. This is important to pay attention to the schedule. Let's say hourly and say every 2 hours. And then this is UTC time. So what this does here is, when do you want this job to be effective starting and then the end date? So, if you want it to run, essentially forever, then you leave this. Let's say we only wanted it to run for a couple days. Let's say change this. So that's all set there. And this UTC time, we're going to pay attention to that because that's going to actually look at a date timestamp in our table and then pull data based on that time. And I'll show you that in a minute. So let's click next. So here's our source data store. Pretty self-explanatory. We're going to go against Azure SQL Database. Click next. Now it's going to want to know the name. Let's give it a connection name, something that makes sense. SQL Azure 001. Just, if you just leave the default, it's hard to kind of know, in what sequence you created these, or you can give it a more meaningful name. But I do find that useful to change that name. I have a couple of subscriptions, so I'm going to pick this one. And then this is a logical Azure SQL database where my database is. And it finds the one non-system database out there, which is exactly what I want, Contact Manager DB. Type in my name and password. And if everything's okay, I won't get any errors. Let's click next. So now this is where we're going to pick the source tables, and I've got two tables that I'm interested in, contacts. And when you do click the table, it's going to show you a little preview down here of the data, and contacts 2. So there's two tables that I'm interested in. If I go back there, it'll load a preview. It's a little hard to see down here, but there's the data. So contacts 2 and contacts. You can also use a query. Type in a special query. You can run a stored procedure, then even validate the query. But for right now, we're just doing two tables. Click, and you can also show views if you have views. Let's click next. And now this is a very important screen here. I have a date time column called update date time in each one of these tables. And this is what I want my process here to look at every 2 hours and only pull in data if it meets that criteria. So if you don't already have a column in your table like this, a date time column, then create one. Let's click next. Now it's asking us to pick the destination database. So I'll pick SQL Server because it's an on-premises one. On-Prem 001. I don't think I have one called that. So here's the name of my on-premises SQL Server instance. A database name is Data Factory Test, if I remember correctly. Username. Okay, if there's no validation issues, we'll go to the next screen. Now this is a table mapping. It's going to show us the columns in a minute, but for right now, we're just looking at tables. So here's our source, here's our destination. That's exactly what we want. We're copying two tables, context to context and context 2 to context 2. Click next. Now this gives us at the column level at each one of these tables. So you can exclude columns by unchecking that checkbox. Advanced settings, this has to do with parallel copies, specify the degree of parallelism, and you got all these options here. I'm just going to leave that as auto and click next. Now this is a summary page telling us what it's about to set up, and I'm going to click next, and it'll validate and then start creating these things. Every now and then it fails on its first go here, and it has a little retry button, like if it can't connect to your database, just click retry. So things are moving along smoothly here. Creating the data sets. Data sets, that's a little confusing. A data set is just simply, it's really kind of a logical thing. It's the table that you're picking as its source, or a SQL statement is the input data set, and then you have an output data set. And then a pipeline is the whole thing that we've created, the whole job. A pipeline is really like a job. So we're going to monitor it. So this brings us to a screen here, and then it's going to show us what's happening here, and it's going to create these different time slices. So what's important to remember here is you've told it, or we have told it, to copy everything in these tables with a start time and an end time based on a 2-hour interval. So we're going to do this every 2 hours. This job will wake up and pull in data if it meets that criteria. If you don't have data in the table for that criteria, it won't copy the data. Look up here, this little dashboard. If you click this little gauge icon here, you can go to the dashboard. It's just another way to look at what's happening, what's succeeded, what's failed, what's in progress. Let's just click back to in progress window. So another view of this, and by the way, we just have one pipeline with our different data sets and different link services. A link service is just simply a connection to your Azure database or your file system or your on-premises. And a pipeline is the actual job. And by the way, to make this happen, you need to install a data gateway, which if you don't have one, there's a wizard that helps you do that. We can cover that in another session. But go back here to your data pipeline, and if you click diagram, you're going to see the different pipelines you have created. We only have one, so we're just seeing one. Otherwise, you'd right click on it and say open pipeline, but we just have one, so it essentially is all that it's showing us here. But a couple things you may want to do, by the way, this has two activities in this pipeline: context to context, context 2 to context 2. On any one of these, you can double click, and then you're going to see the different time slices. And this is a slice of, a 2-hour time slice, because that's what you said you wanted. Now, if you do hover over this, it tells you the slice start and end date in local time, but that's really not that helpful, because what it's using for its criteria is UTC time. So it's looking for anything in that table where that update date time column is 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. So that 2-hour time period, and it did find table data for that, so it's ready to go, and it will copy that over. So that's a real high level of how you create a data pipeline, Azure Data Factory pipeline. Give that a try, experiment. It's a great thing to jump in there and get your feet wet with this, and let me know if you have any questions.